Hey, friends and family, it's Christian Smith. I'm back real quick because I want to address something. I made a video earlier this week addressing the church's involvement in the Darrel Walls situation. And that video has gotten more traction than normal for something that I post. And I get a lot of feedback. I get people who are, saying thank you for sharing that. And to those, I feel like that's part of my responsibility with what has been entrusted to me. So thank you for your appreciation and you're welcome. And then I get a lot of people who are like angry, upset. And oftentimes the question that I get when I post controversial, countercultural, counterintuitive messages is, where is that in the Bible? Is that biblical? What does the Bible say about that? Let me tell you what I've learned about biblical knowledge. I've learned that the more you learn about the Bible, the more you realize you don't know. The more you realize how expansive it is. I want to make a correction because some people assume I'm a Bible scholar. I am not a Bible scholar. I have learned from Bible scholars. I'm a theologian. Theologian and Bible scholar are two different things. Bible scholars are people like Dave Garber, who I learned Old Testament from, and Dr. Angela Parker, who is the New Testament professor at McAfee School of Theology. They can sit down and read the Old Testament and New Testament in the original language. Like Dave Garber can sit down with the Old Testament in Hebrew and read to me what it says in Hebrew. That's what a Bible scholar does. That's not me. But I've learned from these people. And as I learned from them, I realized, man, there's so much more than I could ever realize that's in here. So what I've learned about biblical knowledge is that the more you learn, the more humble you become. And I believe the church has created a bunch of biblically arrogant people by convincing us that we know it all with the basic understanding that we were given in Sunday school. And no, there's so much more. There's so much more. And that was a humbling experience for me when I went to school. Like, I'll give you an example. At McAfee School of Theology, one of our dean at the time, his name was Alan Culpepper. It's probably a name you don't know, but in the world of white evangelical theology, Alan Culpepper is one of the foremost scholars on the Gospel of John. If you go into white evangelical spaces and you talk about the Gospel of John, Alan Culpepper is one of the people that you want to reference because he has a wealth of knowledge on this one Gospel of John. I had a conversation with him a few years ago. It was the last time I talked to him. And this dude has committed his entire career reading, research, writing to the Gospel of John. And he said, Christian, even at this stage in my career, every time I read the Gospel of John, I see something I never saw before. I learn something new every time I read the Gospel of John. And this dude is well into his 70s. And he spent his whole career focused on this one book. And yet he still learns stuff. So it's very difficult to see people who haven't given that type of energy and put that kind of time in to insinuate that my words come from a place of being unlearned and being unread. The fact that I've learned as much as I have has only let me know how much I don't know. So be humble, y'all. If somebody shares something with you that you've never heard in the Bible, if somebody shares a perspective with you that, contradicts something you've heard before, take that opportunity to learn. It doesn't mean you're going to agree with that person. Just see where they're coming from. And then when you see where they're coming from, you might say, yeah, I don't agree with that. I'm going to stick with what I already knew. Or you might say, there's something to that. Let me dig a little bit deeper. Let me go a little bit further. When people come on my page and ask me questions, you're going to get one of two responses from me. And it's based on how you come at me. If you come at me because you really want to learn, you really want understanding, you want to figure out, like, how did I come to that conclusion? And you really want to gain some insight from my perspective, I'm going to engage you almost every time. If I have the time to do it, I'm going to engage you. But then there are people who ask me questions not because they want to understand my perspective. They just want to debate who's right or wrong. They want to prove how wrong I am and how right they are. And if that's where you're coming from, I'm just not going to engage you, because I'm not interested in debating who's right or wrong, because we're starting from different places. I always tell people that when I talk theology, I start from a different place than most church people, because most church people want to debate if their interpretation of a text is more authoritative than my interpretation of a text. As a theologian, I start from a different place. I'm not concerned about arguing if my interpretation is more authoritative than your interpretation. I take a step back and I say, let's discuss, why is this text authoritative at all? Let's have that discussion before we have the discussion about whose interpretation is authoritative. I go all the way back to, why do we give this text the authority that we give it? But nobody ever wants to have that conversation because we're theologically and biblically arrogant. I have the humility to know that I can be wrong. I'm also thorough enough to make sure I've learned and I've studied and I've understood and I've checked the different resources before I bring something to y'all. So that's all. Be humble. It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So if you ever want to engage me on something, just reach out to me. But don't come at me just to debate. I'm not interested in debates. I'm not. But I love to share. And many times, if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you as much as I can. I'm also going to direct you to my book, because if you want to understand my perspective, my book is an introduction to my entire perspective on the Bible and theology. So if you're really interested in learning and understanding, my book is the starting place. I'm not going to go back and forth with you with a whole bunch of Bible references and a whole bunch of Hebrew and Greek and all these different, citations. I'm not doing that on social media because I wrote a book about it. I don't need to do that on social media. And if you're interested in really learning, read the book and then let's talk about that. All right. So that's all. I just wanted to address that because a lot of people think that I don't get into those spats because of my arrogance. It's really my humility. Like, I know I don't know everything, but then I also know what I know. So I'm not going to engage in a pissing contest with somebody on social media. Usually if somebody comes at me like that and I respond, I don't respond for that person. I respond for those of you that read all the comments but never say anything. So that's all I got.